It is not a secret at this point that Clair Obscur Expedition 33 introduces characters with layers and depth that carve out an image of almost real, three-dimensional human beings. It's ironic then that my favorite character, and realistically the person whose influence is felt the most across Verso's canvas, is one of the least explored people in the entire story. But through her creations and the impact she's able to have on the painted world, we're at least able to come to some understanding of her true motives and personality. Let's step into the mind of who might be the only thing keeping the Dissandra family together in its time of crisis. She who hauls the weight of the world, Clea. When the fracture first began, when real-world Renoir had finally entered the canvas to tear his wife Aline, the paintress, out, the very first line of expeditioners, Expedition 0, faced with an unknown situation entirely, was merely created at first for search and rescue purposes across the now scattered fragments of the continent. Painted Renoir, Verso, and other members of Expedition 0 like Simon had little to no idea what the massive monolith as well as the giant hulking woman sitting in front of it were, let alone who this doppelganger that appeared as their painted sibling was standing before them when they reached the center of the continent. This woman was real-world Clea, having intercepted Expedition 0 just before making contact with their mother Aline. Coldly, and with little care for the existential dread she may cause, Clea revealed the truth of the canvas to Painted Renoir and Verso almost immediately upon meeting them, realizing that if her painted family was to make contact with Aline, they might be willing to help her maintain influence over the canvas and keep that world alive. Clea, albeit quite naively, believed that the truth would convince the expeditioners to abandon their world and simply accept oblivion, which is quite obviously not what happened. Grief. The main theme and symbolism of Clair Obscur is something that also afflicts Clea herself. Her way of showing it is much different from her other family members. Where Renoir attempts to control his family's grieving process, Aline and Alicia slowly lose themselves in a painted reality where they can pretend no hardship has ever come, and Clea, in her own attempt at coping with the loss of their real-world brother Verso, plunges herself into a lonely war of revenge against the Writers, a faction of enemies in the real world directly opposed to the painters. Hey guys, real quick, if you want to support the channel, make sure you go down to gamersubs.gg/noop and get 10% off your nootropics and energy supplement fix, and we'll get back to the video. Because of Alicia's mistake and Verso's sacrifice, in an act of arson started by the Writers, the Dissandra family fire is exactly what caused all of this hardship in the first place. While all of her family members, both parents and sibling, are able to escape behind a canvas and grieve through domestic dispute, Clea is the one left to pick up all the pieces. It creates a resentment Clea feels for her family, especially towards Alicia, who is supposedly the one to blame for leaving the Dissandra open to attack. Still, despite having every reason to give up and drop everything, Clea holds on to the remaining pieces of the family and does what she can to uphold the values and status her parents most likely taught her before they lost themselves. Clea says as much. Her own mother Aline would have agreed with Clea's impatience towards her family's grief before she was afflicted by it herself. However, Clea does not disregard her family's emotions out of hatred, but more so out of anger. Even though Clea does blame Alicia for Verso's death, Clea does not outright hate her sister from the bottom of her heart. This is made abundantly clear in the Endless Tower, when Clea stresses to Alicia to find her own agency, not follow what their mother or father want for her, but to do what she feels is right. Clea does not belittle her siblings out of rudeness or cold dismissal, but her bluntness and piercing words are, in her own special way, showing kindness. Clea believes in her siblings, both Alicia and, when he was alive, Verso as well. As the older sister, she doesn't exist to coddle them or protect their feelings. Just as her mother probably taught before her, Clea believes her siblings are capable on their own and should be more than aware of their talents and where they can excel. This connection between Clea and Aline, her mother, can be drawn from Aline's own seemingly harsh parenting. Through flashbacks while traveling through the monument, we can see from a young age, Aline diligently taught her children to paint, even sometimes against their will. As we later discover, Verso's fondness for music over art created a rift between him and his parents. But we can also see her reluctance to give praise unless actual praise is due. too, as during the epilogue in the Desandra family manor, on the wall, Aline has displayed all of her family members' artworks, and the smallest of which, too tiny to barely even make out the shape, is Alicia's painting, the only one her mother found suitable to display on the wall. And in Aline's absence, Clea finds it suitable to assume her role as matriarch, both in her actions of maintaining the family status and the way in which she interacts with her family during their time of mourning. This is most likely the exact reason Clea's axon, its corpse found laid across the ruins of Old Lumiere, was originally painted as holding the entirety of the town's weight upon its back. As mentioned by Alicia in the third act while scaling the Reacher's Tower, Renoir's painting creations always have symbolisms and meanings behind them, a parable to mirror the person or personality Renoir is bestowing upon the art. An obvious admission on Clea's father's behalf that Renoir is more than aware of the weight Clea carries on her shoulders while he and Aline waste their years inside Verso's childhood canvas. Weirdly enough, a character Clea actually has a lot in common with is Lune, the child of two engineers and members of Expedition 46. Lune describes her childhood as one of immense pressure and little free time, basically being raised from an early age to carry on her parents' work and legacy, even outright admitting Lune believes her parents only had her because they needed a lab assistant. In some optional side content, you can actually discover the place of Lune's parents' death and read their expedition's log, learning that even in death, Lune's parents mention their daughter and how even if they fail here today, Lune will come and finish what they started on her expedition. Later back at camp, when discussing her parents' final words, where Verso interprets Lune's parents' log as the amount of trust they had in their daughter, Lune sees it from a different perspective, that even as they were breathing their final breaths, they were putting all of their desires and expectations onto their daughter, making Lune question that if everything she's ever done up until this point, all of that research, her successes and her struggles, were they really the result of her own actions? Or was Lune merely a product of her parents' actions, her personal thoughts actually just their voices haunting her in death? Comparing this perspective to Clea's resentment, one truly wonders if she isn't lost in her own battle of grief. Is Clea bearing the Desandra family weight on her own accord, or did she really ever have a choice in the matter? Just because Clea can wage a war of revenge and maintain her family's title, is she doing this because she wants to? If she doesn't, is that why Clea feels so much resentment? With this image of Clea's character in mind, it makes a lot of sense as to why she would be the one taking such underhanded and cold-hearted actions to ensure her father removes Aline from the canvas, while her father wastes time sealed beneath the monolith and painting monstrosities like the axons as attempts at weakening his wife's reasons to stay in the canvas. Clea refused to take such ulterior motives and struck at the heart of the world itself, its painted population, showing just as little care as she did the day she met Aline's painted family. Clea condemns the entire world of Verso's canvas to violence and destruction by becoming the mother of Nevrons, the painted canvas's biggest threat to the people within, designed to brutally slaughter any and all painted beings that enter their path. Where Renoir fully comprehended they were playing with actual life, viewing the painted Lumerians as real, breathing humans that he unfortunately had to send to oblivion because of his wife's selfishness, Clea, almost absent-mindedly and with little regard for their lives, sees them as little more than her mother's drawings, trapping her painted self created by Aline within the flying manor and having painted Clea endlessly spawn new designs of Nevrons, specifically shaped to kill in the most macabre and efficient ways possible. By having her Nevrons murder the Lumerians, their bodies consisting primarily of chroma, the energy substance coursing through Verso's canvas that allows the painters to wield their godlike powers, is forever trapped within their corpses, creating the stone monuments of all the expeditioners littered across the world. As more of Aline's creations are unable to return to their source upon death, over time, eventually, the paintress's grasp of the canvas would fade and weaken. Renoir makes it very clear when meeting painted Verso that Aline being able to create actual living, breathing life with personality and three-dimensional human sentience is some of her best work. It's easy to assume creating an entirely fake Lumiere full of an in-depth population of individuals with dreams, hopes, and real emotion probably took mountains of chroma to conjure. With all of that chroma forever trapped into the ether, unable to return to her, it would eventually give Renoir Renroir enough of an advantage over Aline to enact the gommage completely and erase the canvas of life for good. This heartless way of handling things shows Clea's almost psychopathic nature and the almost inhumane separation a painter can have from their creations. Just by acknowledging they are her mother's paintings, Clea can perform mass genocide without a second thought. On her own brother's canvas, no less, a world where the two of them used to play and adventure as children. Although this side of Clea and her interest in mankind's horror, as well as its monstrosities, seems to originate as far back as when she was young, as by speaking with the faded fragment of Verso's soul in the painting workshop, you can learn that the original Lamp Master, one of, if not the most terrifying creature in design and purpose, was painted by Clea when both her and Verso were kids. According to the soul fragment, Clea claims that in order to face Verso's fears, he needed to confront them head-on, creating a mental scar for her brother, despite, in her own childish way, she just wanted to help Verso succeed where he believed he couldn't. Even in her youngest rendition, Clea was a master at painting, able to conjure horrors beyond man's comprehension, even from exploiting her own brother's chroma. Clea's ability to paint over her mother's version of herself in the canvas is something even Alicia confirms only a high-skilled paintress such as her could accomplish. Although she might not be able to create living, breathing humans like her mother, it's not like Clea isn't capable. The white nevrons that can be found scattered across the continent are proof as much. Despite considering themselves defects, as the average nevron are meant to be mindless, bloodthirsty killing machines, the white nevrons are different. Even though they hear their mistress's call, their self-awareness usually makes them question their violent actions, or outright ostracize themselves from other nevrons entirely due to having sentient thoughts and feelings. Although Clea's creations in the canvas are, at their core, meant to be empty vessels, she can't help but accidentally paint a few with sentience. Proof that while Clea presents herself as an unfeeling, vehemently serious powerhouse, her true humanity can't help but leak out from time to time. No wonder her and Francois get along so well. Perhaps, despite Alicia's claim that Aline's painted version of Clea was so despicable it needed to be painted over, it's also possible Clea simply hated seeing a version of herself that allowed true feelings to surface. As another connection to the world Clea has, besides the Nevrons, is to a man born from Aline's creations, an expeditioner named Simon, an old friend of Painted Verso's and a member of Expedition Zero, who, presumably, before the canvas had fractured, struck up a relationship and fell in love with the painted version of Clea in Lumiere. This love was, surprisingly, reciprocated, the two coming to rely and depend on each other in more ways than one. However, when real-world Clea was unable to stop her painted family from siding with the paintress, she entered the canvas and transformed her painted self into the mother of Nevrons. But Clea didn't just stop there. After she sealed her painted self inside the Flying Manor, real Clea decided to take it upon herself to exploit the bonds Painted Clea had laid out for her. Posing as, well, herself, Clea lied and manipulated her painted lover Simon into going after her mother Aline himself, using her power over chroma to paint extreme power into Simon's body. After slaying the Axon in Old Lumiere though, which, conveniently enough, was the second painted version of Clea that had been drawn into Verso's canvas by Renroir, Simon finally made it to Aline, only to discover he had been tricked, learning of real-world Clea's schemes, and most importantly, the bringer of the gommage, Renroir's plans to erase the world. As Simon turned his newfound power against Renroir beneath the monolith, Simon found himself trapped in the abyss beneath Renroir's drafts. Even though Clea never once steps foot in the canvas throughout the entire runtime of Expedition 33, her influence can be felt, honestly, even more so than Renroir and Aline's combined. Despite the paintress's hulking form towering over the world, and regardless of how dominating the power of Renroir's axons are by carving out entire islands for themselves, no one's roots are more ingrained into the life of this world than Clea herself, something that is repeatedly mentioned to upset the fading fragment of Verso's soul, as while his mother and father's battle and their grief-stricken creations expand Verso's canvas ever more than it was supposed to be, it is Clea's nevrons and her effects on the painted people that cause a much deeper, more harsh disrespect that plagues the childlike wonders of Verso's painted world than anything else. While his mother paints life and his father, in parallel, death, the one whose creations devour the world, changing once beautiful landscapes filled with dreamlike wonder into corpse-mound battlefields where Gestrels and Grandis alike live in terror. The person that has tarnished Verso's memory the most, in my opinion, is Clea. But you know what? That's why I love her. Clea's horrific paintings, the way she carries her family on her back, while also in her own shitty way attempts to delegate them the power they need to succeed on their own. The fact she's single-handedly fighting a war against her brother's killers while her family has petty squabbles in Imagination Land. As my favorite super boss in the game, I think we've barely scratched the surface of Clea's character. Thank you so much for watching. Hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you guys in the next one.